And we're coming to you live for the Built Ford Tough Studio. Boomer Esiason, Greg Giannotti. It's Boomer and Gio on the Fan. Simulcast across the country on CBS Sports Network. And wherever you are on the free Odyssey app. Good Tuesday morning. Boomer has talked about how he thinks it's nuts that the Dallas Cowboys would want to fire Mike McCarthy. It's nuts that the Eagles would want to fire Nick Sirianni. It looks like they're going to have a postseason news conference rather with Jeffrey Lurie and Nick Sirianni today. They're going to sit together and give the Eagles fans the plan of what's going forward. So I wonder what you think when Rex Ryan, our old buddy, he may be putting out a hot take into the world, or he may be very serious about that, when he suggests that the Bills could fire Sean McDermott after coming up short again and hire Bill Belichick to be the head coach of the Buffalo Bills. You want to talk about nuts? That would be nuts. Good morning, Boomer. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, G. I mean, do you think that Rex Ryan has an axe to grind with the guy that replaced him? I don't know. Maybe. I'm not, Rex didn't last very long up there in Buffalo. It didn't go very well for him. And then, of course, Sean and Brandon Beane and those guys lucked out, and they were able to draft Josh Allen. Again, I always talk about stability in these franchises, and sometimes I think if you're Dallas, if you're Atlanta, and you went through Arthur Smith, things didn't work out. He chose a couple quarterbacks that didn't work out for them, and you see maybe just a losing that continues in that building since they last went to the Super Bowl. That's when you fire a coach. And that's when you bring in maybe the greatest coach of all time to change the way things are being done and try to get along with the people that are there. When I think of Buffalo, I think a lot of what I think of when I think of the Baltimore Ravens. We have this perception about the Ravens. Now, John Harbaugh has won a Super Bowl, but he hasn't won a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson. They haven't been very successful with Lamar Jackson in the postseason until this year. And if you would have asked me last year, hey, boom, do you think that Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh will ever win a Super Bowl together? Last year at this time, I would say, I'm not so sure. But once he got his contract done, once they started to build a team around Lamar Jackson, now I'm saying the reason that they do have a very good chance of getting to the Super Bowl and winning it and having the season that they had this year was because the owner doesn't overreact to things. The owner down there, Steve Bisciotti, is probably the quintessential type of owner you want to work for. Somebody who stays behind the scenes. He's hired 2 general managers in his time, and that was Ozzie Newsome and that was Eric DaCosta. Those guys have followed a certain game plan. They've drafted certain types of players, and all they are is successful every single year. But yet, they haven't won a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson. So let's fire John Harbaugh. That's the same thing that I would say about Sean McDermott up there in Buffalo. Yeah, of course, they haven't won. Of course, they got hung up with Joe Burrow. They got hung up with Patrick Mahomes. And by the way, these guys aren't slouches. They're 2 of the best quarterbacks in the league, and one happens to be the best quarterback maybe of all time, depending on what his career ends up being in Patrick Mahomes. So I understand that those guys work for ESPN. I understand that they're told to have very hot takes and be opinionated, and nobody's more opinionated over there than Rex Ryan, so good for him. He's actually learned how to do this on the dark side of things. But the practical aspect of all of this is that when you go in and you hire somebody like a Bill Belichick, he is basically, can he get along with Brandon Beane, who's your general manager? There's all these different relationships that you have to worry about. I'm not getting rid of Sean McDermott. I'm bringing back, him and Josh Allen. I'm retooling the roster and fixing where I feel like we need fixing, and wide receiver will be their number one spot right now up there on the offensive side of the ball, and try to get the really good defensive players that all got hurt this year, get them back and hopefully be healthy, and they will be right back in the mix next year.
Yeah, it's an age-old thing in professional sports, even in college sports. You can't change the whole roster in 1 year. You can fire a head coach, and then it feels like it's a completely different team, and there's different expectations, especially when a guy like Bill Belichick is out there. I mean, I guess what Buffalo Bills fans that want Sean McDermott fired, and Maggie Gray down the hole is one of them. She wants to move on. They're thinking to themselves, all right, how can we continue to bring back the same group that can't beat those guys? Something's got to change. That's what they think. Now, I don't think that the head coach is the thing to change. I think that you got to retool the rosters. You mentioned Steph Diggs is not the same player. They got to get more offensive weapons. They got to get more depth on defense, which is very difficult to do in the cap era, because that's really what held them back, was Gabe Davis was hurt. Steph Diggs wasn't the same. So their weapons at wide receiver were different and not as lethal as they were. And the defense was hurt. And you had Travis Kelce in the middle of the field catching passes on linebackers that probably shouldn't have been playing in the playoff game. Now, retooling the roster is going to be so much more difficult for the Buffalo Bills. I saw this yesterday in this offseason. And here's why. Cap hit for Josh Allen in 2021, $10 million. Cap hit for Josh Allen 2022, $16 million. Cap hit for Josh Allen this past year, $18 million. Next football season, 2024, the cap hit for Josh Allen is $47 million.
And the salary cap is going up, too, by the way. And then you got to draft young players. You got to get guys that, like Nico Collins, like a Tank Dell down in Houston, that all of a sudden figure it out. And look at the guys in Green Bay. They're going to have to pay Jordan Love. But look at the wide receivers he's playing with. They're making no money. I mean, and so it's not, you don't always need to have the Steph Diggs, the Devontae Adams, all of those guys, even Odell Beckham Jr. and Rashard Bateman and Zay Flowers are all on legitimate low-end contracts for who they are, what they've done, because they're paying Lamar Jackson. I mean, they have to just rebuild around, Josh Allen. They got to get him a couple more weapons, just like when they went out and got Steph Diggs for him. Initially, it was explosive. Now it's basically, it's hit the end point, and they have to redo it and they have to retool it. That's why I'm not screaming and yelling about firing Sean McDermott. And I know Maggie could say that she's a fan of that team and that she can have her opinion. But my practical approach to these things is that they don't have to blow that up. They don't. I mean, they got the number 2 seed this year after that coach got that team from 6-6 to where they ended up. And they fired the offense coordinator. Joe Brady, the new offense coordinator, came in there, and he straightened things out. They started running the ball more. Josh didn't turn the ball over quite as much. And you know what? To me, given where they were as a team and how beat up they were, the fact that they made it that far was really a miracle when you think about it. And the coach deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yes and no, but this was also a team that was underachieving. Now, they did have that part in the middle of the season where they had to go to London and the schedule screwed them up, and that definitely was a circumstance. But, that team was supposed to be where they were at the end of the season. They were supposed to be that number 2 seed. Josh Allen was supposed to be in the MVP conversation. So when they weren't playing that well and they were 6-6 and things were looking terrible for them, I mean, that was a big problem. So the fact that they finally it wasn't a miracle that they got there. They just took a different route. I mean, it was a miracle that the Houston Texans made it to the divisional round. Certainly wasn't a miracle that the Bills did.
I just can't, fathom teams that have, really good years, teams that get to the playoffs, teams that end up suffering key injuries to so many different players, and yet they're still there on divisional weekend. And the game is a great game, and it comes down to a missed field goal from keeping the game being tied. I'm like, now you want to fire the coach? I mean, the general manager and the coach work really well together up there in Buffalo. I don't know all the machination. I don't know why a Buffalo fan would want their guy coached. Fired. I guess, Bill Belichick's out there and Rex Ryan's talking about it. I don't get it. And a lot of these, and I always tell you that the most important relationship is the quarterback and the head coach. And Josh Allen seems to really like Sean McDermott. And I'm not breaking that up. I mean, why would I? I mean, that's what every team is striving for. And there's probably about, 7 or 8 teams that have that relationship. And most of the teams that make it this deep into the playoffs, that's coach and that quarterback have that relationship. And Harbaugh and Lamar have it. Campbell and Goff have it. Purdy and Shanahan have it. And of course, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid have it. And so does Sean McDermott and Josh Allen. So these people could scream and yell all they want. I don't think they really truly understand how hard it is to coach an NFL football team. It's impossible. You got a million different decisions going on, a million things happening around you. You have guys shivving you in the back. You got fans screaming at you. You got social media exploding. You got the media just screaming and yelling that, you need to change, you need to change, you need to change. Instead of recognizing what you have is you got a damn good set of a starting point again now for the 2024 season. I mean, there were Bengal fans early on in Zach Taylor's start there where, like, we got to get rid of him. Joe Burrow got hurt. They didn't play well. And now here we are 4 or 5 years later, and not only did Joe Burrow get hurt again, but Zach Taylor got Jake Browning to a certain level and kept them in the running all the way through the season with a backup quarterback that nobody had ever heard of. That tells me that they got the right coach, they got the right relationship there, and they're going to be good again next year, assuming that Joe Burrow stays healthy. I mean, everybody's so quick to start screaming, fire this guy, fire that guy. And I guess this has a lot to do with the DeMar Hamlin fake punt. That really didn't come back to hurt them because this is the next series for Kansas City is when McCole Hardman fumbled the ball out of the end zone. When you think about they should have won that game kind of hands down because they didn't really have the ball in offense. They were efficient, explosive, and did, I couldn't believe, like 43 plays, 27 points, only 4 third downs. That was an explosive offensive performance by Kansas City.
Yeah, and I also think that in the immediate aftermath of a loss like that, you just start. There's anger.
Yes.
And I think eventually when you get through and you get over that anger and you think, all right, maybe closer than you thought, and then this offseason you do this, you do that. Hopefully the draft is a good draft, and you calm down. So I do think in the days right after, you're angry. And you want to blame somebody, and you want to see heads roll. But then a few days later, you go, okay, we could be this terrible franchise or that terrible franchise. We could be the Jets, for God's sakes. I mean, and look, that we got a great top-end caliber quarterback, and as long as we have him, we're going to be okay. You talked about Belichick a lot. I don't know if it's a lock that he is going to get a job this hiring cycle because reports yesterday that Arthur Blank does want Bill Belichick, but he's getting pushback from his front office and the people that are there because
they want to save their own asses.
Exactly. So that was something that was sort of obvious that it would happen. But, does Arthur Blank say, screw it, Belichick's the man, and he's coming in here, and I'm going to give him the keys to the castle, and that's the end of it? Or is he influenced by the guys that have been in the organization for a while? And if he doesn't go there, I don't know where the hell he's going.
See, if I were Arthur Blank, I'm looking at my team and saying, we've tried this. And things are not working. And the same guys have been here. And for some reason, this is not working and we are not winning. That's legit. That is a legit thing. And there are other teams like the Titans felt like, okay, Mike Vrabel, it got stale there. They're going to hire Brian Callahan, the offense coordinator for the Bengals, who's 39 years old, who's been, through the ringer as a coach, has been around. He's been successful. He was a part of the Broncos Super Bowl 50 team. So now they have him. So now we have basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams still open. The Panthers, Chargers, Falcons, Commanders, Seahawks, and I guess we also have that's 5 teams left open still. I mean, so there's still plenty of time for these guys to make their decisions, but the Bills don't belong on that list.
And they are not on that list right now, and it still would be shocking, but. So if let's say Arthur Blank says, okay, I'm not going to blow this building up by bringing in Bill Belichick, and even though I want to, I'm just going to listen to the guys that were here. Let's say he decides to go that route, even though we don't agree with it. Where else is Bill Belichick going? I don't think he's going to the Chargers. I still think that is where Jim Harbaugh is going to end up, and it's not going to be the Commanders. We know that. Is it going to be the Seahawks? It's not going to be the Panthers. We know that.
Right. I'd be like, like I was telling Frank Reich at this time, I said, what's wrong with taking a year off? I mean, why do we have to go jumping, head first back into something? Especially
Doug Peterson took a year off, right?
Right, especially with what was going on down there in Carolina. The interesting thing is, who knows what the Giants and the Jets are going to look like next year? Who knows? I mean, I can't sit here and tell you that I know the Jets are going to be winning 10 games or the Giants are going to be winning 10 games.
I mean, we know better by now, right?
But again, those jobs may be open this time next year. You never know.
Yeah, and taking a year off when you're in your 70s is different than taking a year off when you're in your 50s.
But you know what? If he doesn't get the Atlanta job, there'll be 5 or 6 jobs open next year. There'll be, it could include a New York team. I don't ever see him coming to the Jets. I'm not so sure that he would want that, but I could definitely see him coming to the Giants if the Giants don't go and, turn this whole thing around. I mean, they've been here for 3 years now.
I mean, isn't it amazing that Bill Belichick is out there and available? You don't have to trade for him. He is a free agent head coach, and he might not get hired during this hiring cycle. That, to me, is nuts.
I think of Arthur Blank as a successful businessman, first and foremost. And probably some of his success is tied to a level of patience. Of just kind of like, okay, let's not overreact. Let's not dive into the pool head first right away. Let's go through all of our interviews. Let's see if there's somebody out there that we like better. And again, I do believe that there is some internal, I wouldn't say strife, but internal people fighting back.
Yeah, a little internal pushback.
And I don't know what they would have a leg. I don't necessarily know they have a leg to stand on, other than maybe some of the athletes that they've drafted down there. You know what I mean? Like, they do have a good young team. They have some really explosive young players, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing that they've done. I don't know what the building is really like. I don't, once losing starts permeating a building, it's almost impossible to turn it around until you get that right quarterback coach combination that can drag that franchise out of the malaise.
You think because we have a program director's job that's open now, do you think if like rumors were out there that a big-time radio executive that we knew of in the past was rumored to get the job, that there'd be internal pushback here?
Depends on what kind of relationship you guys have with them. I don't have a relationship with any of these people.
I think there's somebody out there, and then we all get together, and we're like, no, like what the Falcons are doing.
All right, okay, all right.
We all like, no, we can't let this happen. Internal pushback. Like, I mean, if the owner wants to hire somebody, the owner wants to hire somebody. I mean, it's Bill Belichick, for God's sakes. It's not some guy who's never coached before, which the Falcons do all the time. They hire first-time head coaches. All the time.
That's the other scary thing is that there are teams like the Jets that like to give head coaching jobs to novice head coaches, to guys that have never been head coaches before. The last guy that they gave a job to that had real head coaching was Bill Parcells.
Yep.
I mean, Herm Edwards didn't have it.
No.
Al Groh didn't have it.
Mangini
didn't have it.
Right.
Saleh didn't have it.
That's right. Todd Bowles didn't have it. Adam Gase did.
That's right. Adam Gase did. But that lasted, 2 years?
Yeah.
Oh.
That was a rough 2 years.
I blame that on Peyton Manning. That's his fault. That's his fault.
All right, Boomer and Gio.
You know that.